Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. Hope you're all doing great. It's been quite an eventful day here today. I actually saw a brown snake earlier. I lifted up a paver and moved it, and I didn't even realise till after I moved it that there was a brown snake under it, and my hands must have been 5 centimetres from the snake, less probably. I wasn't even wearing gloves, but I'm still here. So this video will be discussing the topic of waking other people up and the issues around that, and discussing some of the pitfalls and the futility of actually trying to determine another person's belief systems, values and opinions on things based on this context of the ongoing planetary awakening that we're seeing intensify now, with events converging around the world, and a greater mobilization for the collective to actually start to embrace what I just referred to as reality and understand what's going on in the bigger picture. But nonetheless, this, for all the good intentions and well-meaning and inspired people who are actually hearing the call to actually wake other people up, is having its own set of circumstances and things to evaluate from our own point of view, because whenever we're experiencing something, there's always something for us to learn. And there's an ongoing attitude in the awakening community that other people should wake up. Now, for the context of this video, what I'm referring to as waking up is very limited, what I call the lower levels of the awakening. And that's just becoming more conscious of the power structure, the globalist agenda, and all the loosh fest topics that seems to be coming at us with increased pace in 2025. So this isn't obviously, by the way, what I personally refer to as waking up, but that's what the general conversation and the rhetoric around waking up is that people should become aware of all these social, political, economic, even environmental issues. Now, obviously, becoming more conscious is, at least in part, being exactly that, more lucid, more aware, having more clarity around what's going on, and not being indoctrinated by the mainstream media and questioning everything. And I always say, in regard to the mainstream media or political figures or bureaucrats, whoever that are talking, the one question everyone needs to ask themselves is, what is this person trying to get me to think? And if the global population would actually consume information, data, news, social media content from this point of view alone, then this would help a lot. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Our next event coming up is the Easter retreat, the annual Easter retreat. It's at Springbrook on the Gold Coast. We run a shuttle from Gold Coast Airport to the retreat centre and return after the retreat. This retreat has been running since 2008. It's an extremely powerful process that we go through over Easter. And basically the theme this year will be the awakening of the soul, development of what I refer to as soul power, and the need for soul power in this global paradigm shift, that simply consuming content on the internet and claiming to know better than others, be more evolved than others, and all these sorts of things is really going to have a very, very limited value, and is not really it is part, at least in part, a distraction itself. So if you want to come along, you're welcome. Places are limited. Everyone gets their own room, and the code, if you use the code stillness, you get $100 off the fee to attend. So put that in at the checkout, stillness. Hope you know how to spell that. So that's happening at Easter, as always. So in the Gold Coast hinterland, if I forgot to say that. So where are we at with this thing? Well, this idea is, it's necessary to understand that not everyone can perceive what is occurring. Not everyone has the same insights, the same wisdom, the same clarity in the mind, the same discernment as you do, perhaps. And there's no point belittling people or ridiculing people or putting people down because they don't think the same as you. And I'm just using the phrase as you in this video for the context of this video because it's just easy to express it that way. So when we sort of zoom out from that motivation to wake people up, that's exactly what we do need to start to question is, what is our motivation for this? Because as far as I can see, a lot of the motivation for many people in the awakening community is actually fear-based. You know, we've been dragging into this, Orwellian way of living and so on, and people have the lucidity to see it, but a lot of people don't. And there's this reaction of fear, and other people need to wake up and think the same as I do, as the awake people do. Well, if we actually really contemplate that for even a short amount of time, it becomes obvious that our intention there is that other people should think the same as we do. And that's an extremely egotistical outlook and motivation, because it's denying free will. That if everyone must or should think the same as us, then you're basically refusing or denying that person's free will and essentially that person's evolutionary journey to actually perhaps arrive at the same conclusions as what you do, or perhaps not. But free will is one of the rules of the universe, and it is sad to see that many people are just deciding to be cannon fodder and are just suffering in unimaginable ways due to their ignorance. But ultimately we all suffer due to ignorance, and it's just that the ignorance that such soul groups display now is becoming more obvious, and the consequences for the collective are actually becoming more dire. So this is an important point to take into account when you are, whatever intention you have, to try to awaken other people. And it basically doesn't work. So my attitude, that at least for the context of this video, that I think is very beneficial and helpful, is to take the stance that you're something of a lighthouse. Like you are engaging in whatever spiritual practices or activism or whatever it is you feel called to do as part of your personal mission, your soul mission. But you're more having this detached attitude to the outcome of that, which is a far more evolved and more centered and balanced place to come from. So what it means is that you take the course of action you feel called to, you attempt to, with good intentions, you have this state of aparigraha, like this detachment, that you're not basically obsessing over the effects or the results of your actions. And you'll save yourself a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, which, as I said earlier, it's fear-based. And when you can see that in your own psyche, it's a very powerful wake-up call that even though my intentions are perhaps mixed, there's a component or there's an aspect of that is fear-based. And so when we take this out of the equation, or the reaction or the outcome, we're much more in a neutral place. And it's actually a state of deep empowerment, because we do what we can, we take the course of action that we take, and then the effects of that is not in our control, that is not in our sphere of influence. We don't get to decide the outcome, which is actually, when you process this, it's actually a relief. It means that we don't have to worry about that side of the equation. We're trying to have this accountability, this selflessness, that's what the motivation truly is, not to be right, to be the correct one, to know better than others, to be more advanced than other people, to be more evolved than other people. This is just another manifestation of the ego. And if you look at it very carefully, the attempt to get other people to think the way that you do is the same underlying motivation of the groupthink, of the mass formation that we saw in the earlier years during the pandemic in this decade. It's just a different version of that, actually. So it actually means that there are potential situations where one person is not as more evolved than the collective, the hive mind in this. It's just that it's a different version of the same level of consciousness. Now, this is not a black and white scenario. There are obviously shades of grey, but it can be very powerful reflection, contemplation to consider your deepest motivation and so on, and your deepest, are you attached to the outcome? Are you trying to prove other people wrong? Are you coming from a place of hurt where you've been mocked or ridiculed for your own perception of reality, which, let's be clear about this, it can be objectively correct. And that's an important thing to understand, is that some of the things that we're talking about here in the context of this video, they're not subjective, they're objective. That you did actually know what the truth was. You did actually have a higher state of consciousness in your window to the world. But how, at an egotistical level, do you relate to that inner knowing? And that's the real question for all of us on these themes, is that do we do this with an attitude of grace and humility and dignity? Or do we come from a place of, I told you so and this kind of thing, which, okay, it's in shades of grey. The amount of abuse that people on the awakening journey have taken this decade, of being ostracized, of losing their jobs, of losing everything, like people living in caravans and so on. It's been extreme. The challenge is, can you go to the next level now and be more detached and more compassionate with people who are ignorant? Because the reality is that a lot of these people, they are simply not on the journey of awakening. And if you had asked me 2-3 years ago, I would have been much more optimistic about that these people would actually, it would take longer. Some of them, absolutely. But some of them at this point, I've got to say, there is no way. And it's largely, at least in part for many of them, because of pride. And this spiritual test to get to a high state of consciousness, which we're all undergoing this process of evolution, regardless of who we are and what we believe on this planet. Pride is one of the big things that we must overcome. And especially now that can you show, like, the universe, can you embody this more compassionate attitude? It's not easy. And it perhaps doesn't, you may waver, it might not be all the time, but that's at least the goal. That's the road ahead for all of us. So for this reason, I feel like a good way of considering this is to be like a lighthouse, that you are just emitting your light, that you are acknowledging also your own light, and that you continue to put light into the world. It's very important to do that. So the only thing we can really do is really keep planting seeds. Keep planting seeds, and do it with a state of self-confidence, of being empowered, of having this self-belief, and really feeding that back into your actions, so that you're like developing this state of inner strength, that your beliefs are unshakable, that your beliefs are not dictated to the hive mind. I ran a workshop on navigating the shift just recently, and one of the themes we really explored was detaching from the collective, detaching from the hive mind. If I get a chance, I'll make another video about that, about why that's so important now. Because the hive mind is extremely confused, particularly here in Australia now. The confusion is growing. And if you are just completely in the hive mind, then you are lacking discernment. You are lacking this lucidity, this clarity of the mind. Like, this is this Tibetan idea that the mind should be like a vajra, like a diamond, that it should be very clear, very pure. And so we have this capacity to basically see right from wrong, at least in this context. So the reality is to be more self-contained in this way. And I'll just read out some ideas from my book to finish this video on, that it's actually more powerful to just ask questions. Because when someone's asked a question, the brain tries to form a response to that question. The brain will try to answer that question. So instead of making statements to people and just trying to bombard them with facts and this level of awakening, it's really just data. And then it goes into knowledge. There is knowledge, definitely, but true wisdom, it's only a small component. So by that, I'm saying that regardless of how much you educate yourself at this level that I'm referring to tonight, is that it doesn't translate into wisdom in the same way that many people think. And that's going to be the next step for a lot of people in their own process of awakening. So some powerful questions that can be asked that are generic in nature. and comply and apply to many very varying situations include: who benefits from this? Who financially benefits from this? Who would be the most directly affected by this? Who has the most knowledge and insights about this? Who has an impartial view on this topic? What vested interests does this person or organization have? What is another perspective on this topic? Is there an alternative view on this topic? What counter-arguments exist? How can a genuine positive change be made? Where can you find independent, unbiased information on this? Is it possible that you are only looking at this from one narrow angle? Why do you believe this? Is this person truly a reliable, impartial source of information? Is this for the benefit of humanity? And you can find that in my book, Paradigm Shift, The Global Awakening of Humanity, 2020 to 2040, by me, Anthony O'Flynn. And that premise in my book, I would say we are absolutely 100% on track for that at the moment. 2020 to 2040, I wrote that book some years ago. This is the window, and it's really looking like it's accelerating this year. You can watch my other videos. I've got more coming up soon. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more content soon. We live in epic times.